Excited to be here today because we believe deeply that strong leadership at the system level, and not just at the teacher level and the principal level, is critical and fundamental to enabling transformative change in our public schools across the country. Yet our understanding of system-level leadership pipelines, what it really takes to attract and develop and retain highly effective and diverse leaders, is in short supply. Best practices for long-term, sustained organizational capacity building are either rarely understood or poorly implemented. EdFuel's mission through our research, programs, and the tools that we provide and launch, as Mike discussed, are really designed to address that gap in a cost-effective and really scalable way. Over the past year, we've been working on a number of initiatives, but are excited here today to highlight two of those and to engage our panel in a really rich conversation. So first, I want to mention our competency maps. And these are 8 comprehensive leadership competency maps that we designed in partnership with 40 different leaders across the education sector nationally. These competency maps are leveled, and they represent best-in-class benchmarks for organizations to use in sharpening the way that they attract talent, the way they develop talent over time, and then retain talent into more senior leadership positions. The second tool, which we're going to spend most of our time talking about today, is a report that we released in July called Hidden in Plain Sight. And the purpose of this report was to share the findings from a survey instrument we distributed that had almost 400 responses across districts, charters, and nonprofits in the sector nationally, and it was very representative from leadership at all different levels across the sector. Before I jump in and talk about some of the findings, I do want to mention a few of our most critical partners in the work. First, I want to thank New Schools Venture Fund, and in particular, Dr. Deborah McGriff, as well as Alex Karam. I also want to thank the Broad Management Center and one of the staff members, Tom Noble, there. Both of those organizations provided financial resources to make this study possible. They leveraged their networks in collecting responses to the survey, and then both served on the steering committee for this work that really shaped the final report and our insights and analysis. I also want to thank Education Pioneers, and in particular Frances McLaughlin. She served on our advisory committee and then also was gracious enough to allow us to distribute the survey to their Education Pioneers alumni across the country. And then finally, and certainly not least, the Bridgespan Group, and in particular Betsy Doyle. They were our partner every step of the way through the work, and Betsy in particular always pushed us and our team to think more sharply about these issues, and she really brought Bridgespan's expertise from their leadership practice and their education practice to bear in a really warm and thoughtful way. So quickly, who are we talking about when we talk about system leaders? And very simply, it is central office staff members from the 14,000 school districts around the country, as well as central office staff members from the 1,000 plus and growing charter management organizations, as well as junior to senior leaders in education nonprofits, government agencies, policy shops, et cetera. And why do these people matter, and why would you group them together? The pace and scale of change in the education sector is arguably greater now than any time in the last 50 years. From technology to governance models to major policy changes around curriculum, assessments, facilities, et cetera, the system level leaders are dealing with much more complexity and faster changing systems than ever before. The challenge that they have to adapt to the changing environment and serve students through strong organizations is greater now than ever. And we believe deeply that capable, dynamic, and diverse leaders are required to lead our institutions in the work of today. When we think about the problem, we could really boil it down to one of attrition and churn. So much has been said, and actually much has been written about teacher attrition and principal attrition. Very little attention, as far as we can tell, has been paid towards central office retention. One of the key things we wanted to do with our study was to identify not only overall at central offices and with system level leaders, but very specifically at different levels, what does that attrition and turnover look like, and how does it compare to attrition at the teacher and principal level. As many of you may know, the research at the teacher and principal level strongly suggests that there's a positive ROI on investing in retaining teachers and principals, especially in schools and organizations that serve disproportionately large minority communities and disadvantaged communities. Fordham's own Lacking Leaders report, which was released several months ago, made a strong case for significantly increasing both the recruiting of strong principals and then their compensation to retain them for the long term. Our research, which is presented here, found a similarly critical challenge at the central office level. Fully 60% of non-instructional staff at all different levels intend to leave their organization in the next 1 to 3 years. And as you can see here, it's actually much worse at junior positions all the way up to senior manager and director type of roles, where churn over the 3-year period can be as high as 70% or higher. This merry-go-round of talent is very challenging to manage, and it cripples the ability of organizations and teams to build trust, to gel, and then to perform in a high-performing way for students in their buildings. It also raises a series of really important questions for the field that we've identified, such as, where do leaders go? Are there winners and losers? And if so, who are they? What are the major drivers of staff attrition? And then are there concrete actions that organizations can take to address and improve their retention of top talent? And is it worth the investment? So the first question, where do leaders go? This chart shows that at a high level, the news is pretty good. Leaders in the sector typically tend to stay in the sector. We asked, when we asked where leaders were choosing to go if they leave their organizations, 90% were saying they expect to stay in the education sector, and 88% were saying that they chose education as a profession in order to provide a positive impact and create a positive impact in the lives of students. But when we looked a little bit closer at the data, we actually identified a pretty worrying trend. And that is that disproportionately, when leaders are moving from one organization to another, they're choosing to go to nonprofit support organizations instead of staying in districts and charters where their impact arguably could be strongest. This brain drain is a worrying trend, and one that we think has likely been exacerbated over the last 10 to 20 years as more money has flowed to these nonprofit support organizations and their number has increased. Moreover, the brain drain seems to be sticky, and what I mean by that is once someone has gone to a nonprofit, moved out of a district or charter context, they're much more likely to stay in the nonprofit sector as opposed to going back into a district or charter. So then we started to get really curious and ask the question, when leaders leave, why are they leaving? The number one answer by far, represented by the top two answers here on the slide, is that leaders feel like the development and advancement opportunities in their current organizations are either non-existent or limited. In follow-up interviews, we think this is a broadly defined response, not narrowly around title or like a formal increase in compensation, but it's much more about having, year over year, having new opportunities to lead either cross-functional teams, opportunities outside of the organization, or just to be engaged at different levels of decision-making and influence within their current organization. The second thing to note from the slide here is that compensation actually falls pretty low on the list. It's outside the top 5, and that's actually different from many other nonprofit sectors. We think this suggests that there's room for organizations to create a viable talent strategy that does not include having to be in the top quartile or be at the top of the salary scale for staff. Luckily, not everyone is leaving all organizations at once, and we were actually able in the data to identify a subset of respondents who disproportionately were engaged and satisfied in their current roles, felt like their organizations were invested in their development, and for the long haul, planned to be part of that organization. We used a validated survey measure called Net Promoter, if you all are familiar with the Net Promoter Score. And what the chart here shows is that once we identified Net Promoter as a statistically significant way to segment this population of respondents, we then looked for trends to say, for these people who are committed and engaged and feel like their organization is investing in them, what's different? How is their experience different from that of the rest of the population? And far and away, the biggest difference between that population of folks and the rest of the respondents was the way they responded to this question. The question here is, I feel like my organization is committed, let me make sure I get this right, I'm receiving the level of development support that I believe that I need in my organization, full stop. And so on the chart, the right-hand bar are net promoters. The left-hand bar are those who are not promoters of organizations. And the difference in that question alone is 550%. And this suggests that for organizations that are intentional in developing their staff, that is the #1 way to drive retention and to affect satisfaction of their employee populations. So in addition to wonder, like, what is it that creates a difference for people in their level of engagement in organizations, we really wanted to understand what are the different modalities of development that are most meaningful for staff members. And so the chart here shows far and away the most important modalities are on-the-job learning and then internal coaching and training from members of the organization. Clearly, there is a role for external support, programs like EdFuel and others, but we would suggest those should be very targeted and tightly aligned with development plans that are already put in place for staff members. Those should not be driving the bulk of the activity. So we think there's a really powerful story here, that there is a clear solution to attrition and to the talent merry-go-round that exists in our sector today. It's one that is not expensive. The answer is not to pay EdFuel and other organizations to come in and solve your talent problems for you. Rather, it requires an intentional and sustained focus and priority of leadership teams and organizations to design and invest in talent systems internally, supported as appropriate by external providers. It's not expensive in terms of budget dollars, but it is expensive in terms of the time that's required by staff and leadership teams to make that internal investment. So our question to ourselves was, how do we try to end this eternal search for greener pastures? And we actually came up with, based on the survey, 4 very concrete and actionable steps. The first is organizations need to adopt a development mindset. Leadership teams cannot just pay lip service to talent development. They need to orient a significant part of their time and energy towards development activities, including championing development, growth, and retention of staff as a top priority, adequately funding activities and creating leadership team time to build individual and collective capacity, seek opportunities to promote from within, and more frequently use stretch roles as a development tool, and then invest in succession planning. One of the things that we noted in our survey is that only 30% of CEOs have a formal succession plan, and that number is actually much lower when you move beyond the CEO to members of the senior leadership team. In a world where perception matters tremendously, and especially leadership teams and CEOs have lots of things coming at them all the time, we noticed an interesting and sort of a little bit of a worrying trend in the data too. There was a difference in the perception of our respondents between the CEOs and then every other class of leader around how well their organizations actually do the internal staff development. CEOs on balance thought that organizations did a pretty good job, and then all the other people thought it wasn't quite so good. Maybe not totally surprising, but to see that in the data we thought was really powerful. So we argue very strongly that starting at the top with the CEO and the senior leadership team, adopting the development mindset is the right place to start. After that, step 2 we call it building muscle. And very simply, get started. We would argue not to wait for or try to create a multi-year very detailed plan necessarily. Planning is important, but oftentimes what we see is leadership teams will invest tremendous amounts of time and energy trying to get exactly the right plan, and that will either delay the start of important development activities, or the plan that's created is not responsive enough to changing dynamics, and it takes so long to get started that it collapses under its own weight. There are lots of different tools that are either free or very low cost out in the marketplace already to support this kind of development. The three that we found that align really well with our survey results are listed here. One is having strong competency models internally for staff development. Another is the 70-20-10 model that was pioneered by the Center for Creative Leadership, where 70% of activity is on-the-job learning, 20% is coaching and training, and 10% is external development opportunities. And then use of performance and potential matrices, which is an annual ranking of staff based on their current performance and role and their potential to take on greater opportunities, and then using that to identify and prioritize development for staff. We also argue for the approach using these tools to be intentional, proactive, and aspirational as the plan is created. The third element of our framework is to really focus on diversity, and we think that an explicit focus here is just as important as the development mindset that's in that we list in the first step. Many of us are familiar with the differences between the demographics of student populations and those of our teachers and principals. What's not quite as well known, and the data is not nearly as well researched, is how different leadership, the diversity of our leadership teams is from that of our student populations. The data that's shown here is from an Education Pioneers report from December of 2014. It's the best data that we've found that shows at different levels of system leadership how different the diversity of our leaders are from the students that we serve. The risk of leading with statistics in this conversation is that we too quickly reduce the conversation to one around tactics or specific trying to move the needle on the bar, 1 percentage point here, 1 percentage point there, without really reflecting on why a diverse and representative staff is so important for our communities and for the students we serve. Put simply, our work as educators is to connect with students and transform their lives through the gift of learning. The most authentic, powerful, lasting connections are those that recognize and touch each student's personal context, experience, history, and values. The only way to do that is through a school community and a leadership community where that reflects the diversity of the student body, and where the core to familiarity of a student saying, I can see myself in that person, or I can see myself in that leadership team, can be consistently hit and can touch the heart of every student. So while it's important, I think, to use statistics to recognize how far we have to go, I also want to be careful not to just have us focus in on percentage points here and percentage points there. We did mine the data a little bit on this issue to try and identify opportunities or trends specifically to improve the support that we have for minority candidates in different levels of leadership. What we identified primarily is that systems that formalize or make explicit the types of supports that non-minority staff often have informally or implicitly seem to make a difference. The data here shows disproportionate levels of minority staff members retaining and persisting in organizations where they have formal evaluations, a formal coach or mentor program, or strong competency-based evaluation systems. I know several of our panelists in particular are really focused on diversity and really look forward to hearing some of your thoughts on this issue. Finally, we are huge fans of rapid iteration, measuring, testing, learning, and adapting as individual initiatives are launched and then scale up. We think in particular what's valuable in this step is the opportunity for peer organizations and peer leaders to connect, to share what's working and what's not, and to learn from one another. I'm incredibly pleased to announce today that we are taking the next step in this work based on positive early response to Hidden in Plain Sight, to the report, to our competency maps, And based on lots of questions from leaders who were saying like, great, okay, what's next? What are you actually going to do? EdFuel and Bridgespan are going to design and launch a facilitated 6-month cohort of first of CMO leaders around the country and then of district leaders around the country to go really deep and to share best practice and insights around talent development, talent systems, and then make all of the tools, the frameworks, the processes, et cetera, that come out of those cohorts available nationally in an open source way. The work's supported by generous contributions from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as well as the Robertson Foundation, and we look forward to sharing more about that in the months to come. So in closing, we see a real win-win for the sector here. At the sector level, investing in talent development, especially internally, really increases organizational capacity, it creates stronger teams, greater bench strength, and then when turnover does occur, there's more of a plan in place to address it. And then in the short term, there actually, we think, is a real competitive advantage that individual organizations can create by getting ahead of the curve, making their organizations a destination point for talent, and then keeping that talent for the long term for the betterment of the communities they serve. I hope you agree. I look forward to the remarks from the panelists, and I will turn it over to my colleague, Betsy Doyle.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Jimmy said, I'm Betsy Doyle. I'm a partner at the Bridgespan Group in our education practice and have had the great pleasure of working closely with Jimmy and with EdFuel over the past year on a number of the initiatives he described around system-level leadership in education. And so I'm... Terrific. And so I'm thrilled to be here today with this terrific panel to dig into some of the issues, perspectives, data that we shared in the report. And so we'll have a moderated panel discussion, and then I look forward to welcoming questions from our audience. So let me just get started with quick intros of our panel today. I'll start here on the right. We are joined by Talia Shaw, who is the Chief Human Capital Officer at Tulsa Public Schools. Talia joined the district in 2010 as a Tulsa Public Schools Fellow, which is a program modeled after the Broad Residency. And her responsibilities at the district are many, but include building a performance management system. I'm also joined here by Kara McGuire from Uncommon Schools, where she's the Senior Director of Diversity and Talent Development. Kara joined Uncommon in 2009 after a number of years with Teach for America in Los Angeles. I've also got Dr. Deborah McGriff, who is a managing partner at New Schools Venture Fund. And Deborah has a wide set of leadership experiences across both charter work through Edison Learning and also in the district context, where she was most recently the first female general superintendent of the Detroit Public Schools. And Deb has also just been a key advisor and supporter of EdFuel and of this work since the beginning. And then finally, our CEO of EdFuel, Jimmy Henderson, who joined EdFuel in 2014 after a stint as COO and CFO at the E.L. Haynes Charter Schools here in DC. So thank you all for joining us. And so I thought I would start off our conversation today with a personal question, because so much about leadership development is personal. And so we heard a little bit about where you sit now and where you joined your organizations, but would love to have you start by just telling us a little bit about where you started your leadership journey and maybe an inflection point, so a moment, an experience, a person who really made the difference as you think about what it took for you as a leader to get from there to here. So I wonder, Kara, if you might start.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and it's exciting to be here today. I'll try to lean back and say hello to you folks on this side too. So I started in the classroom teaching 6th grade science and math in Los Angeles, and I think I should say my parents were public school teachers growing up, and the last thing I thought I would ever sign up to do is teach. You know, classic story of many of us who find ourselves in the classroom. I think that as soon as I started my teaching career, I just realized there was nothing else I would rather be doing than working for students and families to make sure that every school that students could go to was excellent. I was lucky enough to find Uncommon Schools and kind of stumbled into the talent world, really. But I think an inflection point for me was really getting to work with some of the senior leaders at Uncommon and seeing how thoughtful they were about solving really, really complicated problems. Our CEO, Brett Pizer, I've gotten to work with a lot over the years, and one of my former mentors here and managers at Uncommon, Laura Mice, is actually in the audience with us. But these are folks who just were incredible to learn from how they took really complicated problems and would demonstrate their critical thinking of breaking that down into what we could do to be solutions oriented, which I think is incredibly hard in this work when it is so nuanced and so complex to find really thoughtful solutions, especially ones that we can do at scale. So I was lucky to get a lot of mentors early in my career who could guide me along the way, but I would certainly say that it resonates with me that people stay and grow in organizations when they are fed and developed by excellent leaders at that organization. That has certainly been my experience, and looking at some of the data today, I suspect it is a universal experience.
Terrific. Thanks, Karen. We'll definitely circle back on that theme shortly. Talia, could you?
Great. So very happy to be here with all of you today. I, just like Kara, did not think that I was going to end up in public education. I actually started my career working in the for-profit sector and then moved to nonprofit and absolutely love the work. And I think that came from the personal journey of my family who immigrated from Peru, from South America to Seattle, Washington. So my personal connection to public education came as an ELL student who had to basically deal with the pitfalls of being a student that was seen not only for my talent, but basically for the challenges that I brought in a different language and with different cultures. So when I was recruited to come to the district for a fellowship, I thought, I'm going to give this a year or two, and then I'm going to go ahead and move on and do something else. Well, it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be the journey of life, and I think it came back in full circle because not only did I get to work with amazing educators who try to solve really complex problems, as Kara said, for the benefit of students, and to see myself, being able to give back to a system that, even though it's not perfect, has allowed me to seek opportunities and develop leadership, and now to do the same in my own community. And Tulsa has become home to me, and to see the results that's producing, it's extremely exciting. I tell my mother, who was a public school teacher for 25 years, that this is the most challenging work that I've ever done. It's the hardest that I've ever worked, and I'm totally in love with it. And for her, there was no prouder moment than me going and working for the school district. Nothing that I did ever made her so proud, even when I had the first grandbaby in the family. So, but my work at TPS was focused first on developing a teacher evaluation system and working with an amazing group of talented individuals supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I also had the very, I think, lucky, moment in time where not only did I have great support from folks from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but also from great educators that were at TPS really working with one end in mind, and as to define what an effective teacher should look like, and how do we make sure that teachers receive the type of support necessary so that they can positively affect student achievement. So from leading that effort as sort of a project manager, I moved on to the work of overseeing all of our human capital work and talent management. So we're a relatively, I think, small in comparison to a larger urban districts, but yet, very much representative of our community. At 40,000 students and 7,000 employees, it's a big system. There are a lot of talent challenges to solve, and I think that's what keeps me motivated.
Thank you, Talia. I think you can get a sense for why we selected these folks for the panel. Deb, how about for you?
Great. I'm very happy to be here as well, and I'm just elated that we have an audience in Detroit watching us. My story is somewhat the same and a little different. I started teaching in New York City in 1970, but I knew in third grade that I wanted to be a teacher. I read the autobiography of Mary Bethune, and I knew that somehow I was going to have a national reputation doing great things for the children of our community. I stay in places because I've had great mentors. I worked in Community School District 13 for 15 years before I left to pursue my superintendency. And when I went to Edison, I was there for 15 years, and I've been at New Schools for 7. But in all of those positions, I was attempting to find leaders who could run organizations themselves. Unfortunately, I have not led the talent for an organization, and that was not my desire. My work now, even with New Schools, is to find passionate entrepreneurs with powerful ideas that we invest in so that they're able to create organizations that can create either excellent, innovative schools for underserved kids or the tools and services that those organizations need to be successful. And our goal is to make sure that there is not a gap between the senior leadership of those organizations and the CEOs that we invest in and the board members that serve those organizations.
Terrific. Thanks, Deb. And Jimmy?
So my transition point into the sector was not as a teacher. I came directly from the private sector and from a consulting firm called Boston Consulting Group into a role at E.L. Haynes that was as an operator and also as the chief financial officer. And that transition was incredibly hard. Consultants typically have a different mindset than operators do. And honestly, the pace of daily decisions and the urgency around our work at E.L. Haynes in a charter school that was growing and scaling felt a lot, it was just a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, frankly. And my passion for EdFuel and for this work comes from the incredible mentorship that I got, not only from the head of school, Jenny Niles, who's now the Deputy Mayor for Education, but also from 2 board members in particular who went way out of their way to invest in someone who was on the senior leadership team. And I felt like I could meet with or call these people anytime I was trying to figure out how to get a bond deal done and then how to open a new campus. They were just very meaningful mentors in my life. And I think that speaks to the importance of and the power that boards can have, not only in developing the CEO, but developing the senior leadership team.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Jimmy, and thanks to all of our panelists. So let's dig in. I thought we could start with the problem that Jimmy described coming out of our EdFuel Hidden in Plain Sight research, which is both this revolving door of talent between and within districts, charter management organizations, and education nonprofits, as well as what seems to be a chronic underinvestment in what it really takes to develop and retain leaders over time. So Deb, I was hoping we could start with you. You're someone who now is in a role of funders. You've worked in a charter environment, in a district environment. What do you observe to be some of those really critical challenges when it comes to leading or to developing and sustaining a leadership pipeline?
I think, one, we don't have enough organizations working in this area trying to solve all of the problems that are being identified in the study. So that's one reason why one of our investment areas around people is actually finding organizations that can do several things. One, we think to tackle this problem, you have to deal with the biases, both personal, institutional, conscious, and unconscious, that people bring to the work. And so we've invested in the Fellowship for Race and Equity, ran by Michelle Molitor. We also think that you need to have a pipeline, and Jimmy talked about a pipeline, and Carmita Vaughn is here, and we've invested in Surge so that we can get that group of middle managers that are aspiring to be senior managers. And as I said earlier, you must have CEOs that are Black and Latino. 94% of our students are Black and Latino in our portfolio. And therefore, we have to create more CEOs that are running organizations for young people. And so we've invested in Camelback Ventures. The CEO is Aaron Watson. Aaron Walker. I always call him Watson and he kills me. Aaron Walker. And we have a group of fellows who are starting their own organizations to tackle a number of the problems that underserved communities need to overcome so that there are more leaders that reflect the diversity of those communities. We will be announcing a new challenge in a few months. We haven't yet invested in an organization that's focusing on helping boards become more diverse. We did invest in charter school partners. We're expecting them to add that to their work, and they will probably compete. And as we look at our numbers, and we do look at numbers, because we don't believe if you don't track things, you don't do the things that you don't track, and you don't know if you're being successful. But we pay very close attention to critical mass theory, and we think that that theory indicates that you have to have approximately 30% of a group participating in your work for them to feel included and not to feel that they are representing their racial or ethnic group. We also think that this work is not going to happen if all we do is make the rooms more colorful, but we haven't shifted the power and the decision making in those rooms. So we are very focused too on not doing it to communities, but finding people in those communities, and not all of us who are brown or black represent those communities given how do I say this? Given the advantages that we have. And so all of that, to me, is a part of making sure that the solutions are effective.
And Deb, could you talk a little bit more, as you've done this research and have been building, this body of work, about what do you think's underneath the challenge? Like, I think when you think about why don't we have, that leadership in place today? Is it something that, what do you think some of those key barriers and challenges have been to date?
Well, I think I listed some of them. Our own biases, the structural biases, stop us from hiring people. We're not educating enough low-income and working-class Black and Latino kids to be eligible. So our schools have to do better to create a pool. We don't have a pipeline. So even if your recruiting strategies are strong and you're not finding people, we're not connecting to the various organizations that could help us build a pipeline so that when we are recruiting, when we're going through the recruiting process and the interview process, we can be more effective. And that's when we wanted to fix the teacher problem and the principal problem, that's where people started. And our numbers are much better. In 1998, my husband stood up in a meeting and said, this room is too white. And we brought together people in the ed reform movement in Chicago, and everybody started working on, not everybody, but a few key organizations started working on teachers and principals, and it changed. But we have not yet mobilized around senior leadership and board representation. And we just have to focus on it, study the research, track our successes, and it'll change.
Thank you. Well, we're definitely going to circle back on that diversity topic, because it is something that we elevate in the report and is critical and urgent for many of the charter systems and district systems. But staying with the problem for a moment, and just thinking a little bit about, I think some of the findings here, which is, we have high turnover, we're under-investing in development and support. We tend to get a lot of head nodding when we share that with people, and when we say, what will it take to address it? Well, it means thinking about really shifting mindsets, making this a priority, building the capacity to do it. Again, some good head nodding. But then we have the question of, why isn't this in place today? If we all know, right, like flossing and eating our vegetables, this is good for us, why aren't we seeing more of it? So, Jimmy, I don't know if you want to reflect a little bit about just in the interviews and conversations that we've been having in the field, just getting a little bit underneath. Why is this a priority for CEOs, or if it's not a top priority for folks, what do you think is going on there?
I wonder a little bit, and I'd love to pose the question to Kara and Talia. Is there a fundamental belief within the leadership teams that the marginal investment of time in developing staff really will make a difference in retention and organizational capacity? And so maybe for you all, because I'd love to hear the character of your conversations as a leadership team, and is that belief really as strong as it needs to be to affect change? And not just affect change in for a 3-month period where we're going to sprint, we're going to start some initiatives, but then they all peter off.
Right.
It seems like it needs to be a sustained, consistent investment and belief that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, so we definitely have dealt with the pitfalls of a high turnover rate, right? Even among system leaders and central office leaders, we're averaging about 14 to 15% turnover rate over the last 7 years. So that's pretty high when you're trying to build teams and you're trying to sort of create the groundswell of people that are going to create change, that are going to support the work. I think it's difficult for a couple of reasons. And so contextually in Oklahoma, when funding is so limited, we're 48th in the nation in per pupil spending. The focus is always in the classroom. So what can we do to place more teachers in the classroom? What can we do to support schools? So everything that is central office driven or that is systems driven it's short-sighted in a way, because you have to prioritize dollars that go into the classroom. And just to give you an example, our starting salary for a brand new teacher is $32,900, and our per pupil spending is about $7,000. So we are definitely underinvesting in Oklahoma. So when you're talking about stretching that dollar, development and leadership development for central office staff doesn't come up as a high priority, right? I'm trying to fill classrooms with teachers. I'm trying to fill vacancies, and we're trying to serve students with a very, very tight budget. But again, that's the short-sighted, characteristic of that view, because you know that in order to change and actually create that systemic support for schools, you also have to have a high-performing organization in the central office. So I think seeing that, I think it became very evident, and if you'll indulge me, I'll tell you this brief story. Our superintendent back then in 2012, he was retiring, and he announced that he was retiring, and we were all waiting for him to retire. And as soon as he retired, everybody who was there basically left. So within a month of his announcement that he was going to retire, people started leaving. Executive staff started leaving, and we were already prepared for his departure. And then he said, "Well, since everybody left, I guess I'm going to have to stay." And the board said, "If you're going to stay, we want you to stay." And everybody wanted him to stay. We were prepared for him to leave already, and then everyone in executive staff left. So the board said, we're going to have to work on developing the bench. So that's when the board got behind what leadership development needed to be like, because this was a perfect problem. The superintendent leaves, executive staff leave, there's no one on the wings to be able to take on the work and continue. So he decided to stay, and he commissioned a study, a leadership sustainability study, that then took us to a whole restructure to strengthen the bench at the executive level. But that's just to give you an example of sort of the problem, right? So we're reactive in terms of when these things happen, this is when we start worrying about leadership development. So as soon as things settle down, it's no longer a priority and it kind of falls off the radar. But you have to be thinking constantly, and you have to develop the groundswell of folks at the top that continually believe that developing people and developing talent is a key strategy for reform.
Thank you for that. And I think in both of the stories that you shared, I think just a really powerful tension between so often, the very real urgent problems of today and near-term challenges at the classroom level, but then also just the realities of talent development, which it is a marathon. It's a long play. And so thinking about how systems can really build and adapt with both of those in mind. And Kara, wonder, how does that play out at Uncommon? What have you seen in terms of the challenge? Because I imagine similar tensions hold true in your context.
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with a lot of things that Talia shared. I think many folks working in the work that we do, we pride ourselves on moving with urgency, on having high capacity for our teams all the time, on having lean staff. Uncommon Schools runs fully, our central office runs fully on the public dollar. So we're very, very conscious when we add in any other full-time employees to our teams. And we've always prided ourselves on we'll just find that A+ talent, right? And so there's, that was true, but there's some hubris involved, I think, in believing that that's your strategy, that you're just going to always be able to find A+ talent. And I reflect now that we're at a moment where it's just kind of one of those moments of truth organizationally, where There is more competition for talent out there than there ever was before. The economy is improving, which is terrific news. It's hard when you're a recruiter, though. And we also are growing as an organization and trying to show that we can solve this problem at scale. So not only do we face the external challenges, but internally we have more demand for talent than we've ever had before. So I think all of those factors, and I'll echo what Talia shared, just force you to think about the long game in a different way. And we can no longer sort of do the same things we were doing before in recruitment that allowed us to feel like we could be totally successful. We really have to focus in on what it means to retain excellent folks, and succession planning in particular is a long game. That's what it is. But making sure that you have the prioritization and the priority of people's time and energy around this is really challenging when you have the urgent day-to-day of running excellent schools.
Can I just jump in? Because New Schools is a very small organization. We have fewer than 40 people, and there is this group in the study that are the nonprofits. Mm-hmm. So what was described for a school district, and we helped build the CMO market, mm-hmm. So we know that, well, what's described for a CMO market is not the actions that New Schools would take as a small venture capital organization. Mm-hmm. So our story is we were very fortunate. We have a new CEO. But even before our new CEO came, New Schools made a commitment to increasing diversity at the leadership level and at the board. When we hired our new CEO, Stacy Childress, embraced that goal. She then diversified all of the new hires that she came in, reflected her commitment. She also announced that I'm going to help diversify our board, and there's a process in place to make that happen. The fact that we have talent and leadership and this goal as one of our 3 major investment areas says that from the leadership level, this is a priority, and I'm going to have a strategy, and I'm going to put money behind making this happen. This study will help us at New Schools. We use venture Net Promoter Score too, both for our ventures and internally. But I think this gives us another way to look at the Net Promoter Score. And our Net Promoter Score is very high. Mm-hmm. But we're also a very small organization where it's not possible you usually don't come to New Schools and start at an entry level and make your way up to a partner. And therefore you have to think about talent development and how you support people in a different way. But this 70-20-10 is something that we embrace. People have money that they can use for their own professional development. But I think we have to talk about a smaller nonprofit and how they approach this in a slightly different way from a large urban school district or a CMO that's growing and scaling. Mm-hmm. But it can still be done if you are strategic and you are committed and you put dollars behind your commitment.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think, several of you have mentioned, just the sustained commitment. Kara, you called it a long game. I think this mindset shift of, if we really want to take this on as a system, as a nonprofit, as a CMO, it's something that we want to really lean into over a period of time. And so I'd love to get practical for a minute. I think this all sounds great, but when I was sitting in your shoes as we were working on the report, it's like, okay, well, so who's actually doing something here that's encouraging, that's promising? What does this look and feel like on the ground? And so I'd love, Talia and Kara, to start with you and just get a sense of, we I think have a shared understanding of the problem. There's a shared sense of urgency around getting some work done, and both of you are here today because you've been tasked by your organizations to really help figure this out. So would love to just get a sense, Kara, let's start with you about what does this look like at Uncommon? What are you tackling today at the home office?
Yes, so I should say our data, when we look at it, looks very much like what we just looked at together. So that's both affirming and a little terrifying, since we know that we are all in this together, but we have a lot of work to do. So what that means is we saw the same kind of echoes of opportunities for growth and clarity around the future were big rocks for us in our central office staff satisfaction. And so those are really, what we had to start with is like, how well did we understand that problem? Did we understand what it meant to folks, what they were talking about? And so through a series of interviews and focus groups and some more questions, we tried to dig down at, similar to what you did all in this research, to say, what do we really think this means to people? And I think that what we what we started to suspect and what we started to see is like we have a very high percentage of managers at Uncommon Schools. So whether intentional or not, and I think this is something to consider in your own context, we have about 50% of the folks in our central office managing, and that's pretty decently high. Typically in most organizations you see between 25 and 30%. So we started to see that the manager could be this real change agent for us because they are the person who is kind of most close to someone's work in terms of what stretch opportunities could look like, what capacity looked like, what performance looked like. So starting with that, we thought, wow, we really need to build out then kind of a scope and sequence of what manager training looks like here. We don't even have a theory really as an organization of what good management looks like or what we expect you to do, what the best practices are. So we felt like that was something we needed to start tackling. And the other place where we saw that was really challenging is Uncommon actually has long had this focus on development. So we have a people development system wherein folks receive, we did 3 2-by-2 conversations between managers and staff a year and an annual 360 process. So we were like, we think we have a lot on the feedback side. But what we weren't parsing out from that was some of this goal setting or any sort of annual review process that we thought were probably critical in helping to develop more clarity for folks. We didn't really have a clear way of talking about pathways to promotion or what next steps could look like because, again, we were really focused on these discrete skills in these 2-by-2 conversations, but not really on a holistic picture of like how you were doing with all of these competencies over time and how that could lead from this step to the next step. So we're at the very beginning of all of this work. I'm sure we will learn lots as we travel down the path, but what we are starting with are these 2 kind of big rocks of work, one around how we're developing our managers to be proficient at the set of behaviors we think they need to do to help these areas, and then 2, how are we parsing out the development system we're using so that it's as clear as it can possibly be and feels very tangible. So when someone is, for instance, working on developing a stretch opportunity for someone on their staff, they have kind of competencies to go back to, they have a review to look at, they have tools to guide them there, rather than what we're doing now, which is just relying on the fact that we have great managers. So of course they're going to be able to figure it out. So that's some of the starting place. And I'd really say it's starting place in the true sense of there's a lot of other things that we're going to need to do as well.
Mm-hmm. But I really appreciate in what you described just that act of you just even acknowledging that management and good leadership, good development is something that can be learned, and relying on, as you said earlier, bringing in A+ players who know how to do all of that is increasingly tough and competitive. And so interesting to see that you've kind of taken on that. How do we learn to manage well as a key part of your work? Talia, I really appreciated the story you shared earlier about the superintendent's departure and then not. And would love to hear, you started to talk a little bit about the charge from the board around leadership and succession planning, but what does that look like today? What are some of the things that you feel like are most exciting happening on the ground?
Sure. And let me clarify, when I said we were ready, I meant we're prepared. He was a beloved superintendent, and so anyway, but he did stay, and he stayed for another year to kind of develop a succession plan and really strengthen the bench. And so we're taking baby steps, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think if I would say there's something that's really working is when we restructure our central office, or actually our executive team, we created a much more nimble principal supervisor type of structure. So we used to have 2 associate superintendents, one for elementary and one for secondary sites, one overseeing 56 elementary sites and one overseeing 29 secondary sites. So that was an impossible model because basically the assistant superintendents did nothing but put out fires and manage crises. Mm-hmm. So what we knew was that this role of the principal supervisor could be, number one, like a game changer because it would allow for a very smaller ratio of no more than 12 schools to one principal supervisor. But we wanted to do it right. So not only did we engage the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy, run by Betsy Ahrens, to do a full study organizationally of like how these roles should look like and lean on the most recent research to develop those job descriptions. And it's kind of using a little bit of a competency approach to decide what's going to make this role successful, how does it impact student learning, but most importantly, what development do these folks need in order to be ready for these roles. And I think so that was our first sort of baby step towards creating these roles. We hire the first set of folks, but then we immediately knew that we needed to invest in their development. And so we sought out opportunities, and we were thankful that the Wallace Foundation had a principal supervisor initiative. And we had already done some of the pre-work, so we were a little bit ahead of other districts, but they went ahead and funded us. So what we've been able to do is provide not only very deep coaching for the principal supervisors, but we also developed an excellent plan to onboard them, which is not what most central office staff members have access to. They don't have access to a great onboarding. It's basically, here are your keys, here's your phone, good luck. And that's not what makes successful executives. So we started with that work. And what's now, it's that the second iteration of the work is also, how do we develop this pipeline? Because we also knew that we were investing a lot of money on the professional development of these folks around, learning blended coaching, how to provide feedback to principals, what are the best structures to not only mentor, but also develop their talent, that we knew that there was a risk that these positions are vulnerable to high turnover. So how do we develop the pipeline? So we started creating a cohort, and we're now in our second year, where we selected internally high potential principals and placed them in a cohort and invested funds in not only providing them with coaching, but also practical on-the-job experience. So these are folks that were high potential that had an interest in coming to the central office. And there are 10 of them who are receiving professional development and coaching. They're receiving on-the-job training, what it would be like if you were a principal supervisor or a central office leader. You're working on specific projects, and you're working right alongside a mentor. So we've seen a lot of growth from those folks in their first year. They're going now into their second year. Now that is a discrete effort because it has been funded by private dollars. If we had not had the opportunity to apply for those Wallace dollars, we wouldn't have been able to do this. But what that has opened up for us is the opportunity to see how does it look like now on the next level of directors and managers who could actually have a similar process, which is why EdFuel was such a godsend, because the blueprints for success were incredibly timely as we now venture into creating basically a pathway for central office leaders to receive development. So we're just in the baby steps of that work in terms of talent mapping, and then deciding basically what structures we're going to put in place to provide managers and directors with similar opportunities to grow, and then and hopefully retain them, because we'll be able to provide them those opportunities.
Great, thank you for those specific and exciting things happening on the ground in Tulsa. And Jimmy, I wonder if you and then Deb, you could think a little bit, maybe stepping back from the CMO and specific district examples, but as you look across the field of organizations and systems that you work with, what are you seeing in terms of common practical solutions, or what seems to be getting some early momentum and traction? Talia mentioned the competency maps, and so perhaps that's a place to start.
No, I would actually want to build a little bit on what you're describing with this cohort of next generation leaders that you're investing in intentionally, in the hopes that they might then, some of them might graduate to the next level. And there may be different variations of the level of support or investment that organizations can provide there, but things like even very simple, relatively inexpensive opportunities like job shadowing, or which would be short of the formal cohort that you're describing, or creating one-off stretch opportunity roles that might be 3 months, they might be 6 months, where it's a discrete part of that person's time that's set up in advance and really designed and pitch to them, for lack of a better word, as we wanted to use this as a development opportunity for you. I think there's a lot of power in that, and I see the most powerful examples I hear of from clients we work with are variations on that theme. And what I'd love to hear, either now or afterwards, is do you see any knock-on effects of, because everyone in your cohort of 10 probably are not going to be in a like a principal advisory role or supervisor role this year or next year. But I'd love to hear in terms of their motivation, their level of engagement in their current role, how well they understand and are executing in their role as a principal. Is this cohort improving that? And is it?
Absolutely, and I think that's sort of the cherry on top, because not only are these folks have experienced tremendous growth in their current roles, but they're also mentoring other principals now, which is just an after effect. And two of them have an opportunity to actually full-time, not full-time, I'm sorry, with partial release time, they're actually mentoring other principals and beginning to develop their talent as well, and others are doing it informally, and just because what they're learning has them so much more engaged in the work, and has actually been very, I think, invigorating and for them, and inspiring to be in those roles. And we realize that we spend money on stipends, and we spend money on a coach for them. We spend money on providing them lots of opportunities to attend, like the Relay National Principals Academy, which is incredibly pricey but so powerful. And those are things that will probably not be available for everyone. But how do we take those learnings and create the type of opportunities that you're mentioning? We do have them shadow a principal supervisor. It's not as I think we could structure that in a way that could be replicable in smaller chunks, as opposed to having such time-intensive PD. But we also know that even if not all of them make it to a principal supervisor role, I'm looking at a couple of them for a potential human capital role, because they definitely have the talent, they definitely have the energy, and now have developed a different skill set on providing coaching and feedback to principals that they didn't have before.
So Jimmy, you talked a little bit about the shadowing, about the stretch opportunities, other things that you see kind of getting traction or momentum that are worth.
Yeah, I mean, there strikes me as a cost continuum, where what you've done with the support of private dollars is the Cadillac version. There's a free or very cheap version that's limited shadowing, like opportunities to test and learn, those kinds of things. Another thing I think that defines where a program falls on the spectrum is the access to coaching, and whether that coaching is internal coaching or external coaching. I think that we see lots of people playing with different iterations of that. And in particular, I think there are opportunities where EdFuel, with our coaching cadre, can provide, either us or other providers like that, can provide relatively low cost, very high quality coaching that's very targeted. And the mix of job shadowing, a lot of the program, like elements of the program you're describing, plus coaching, is where we see people innovating.
And Deb, how about for you? I know you work with a lot of different charter organizations and board seats and just in a lot of these conversations. So would love if you reflect about, what seems to be getting momentum or specific things happening on the ground that you're excited about.
I want to talk about two things that we have touched on, but I think we might emphasize a little bit more. And one would be team. One is about developing the individual, but it's also about developing the team, and the strategy has to be about how you build team and how team works together. And so even as we're doing diligence, we're not just investing in this passionate entrepreneur, but in this entrepreneur's vision of their team, and then we work with them to help build that capacity. So internally, we would want a manager to be able to do the same thing with the team that they work with. And if it's the 70-20-10 model, then 70% of your time is spent with 2x2s, one-on-ones, where the person that you're managing can bring their issue and they can be coached in a regular way. We're not anti-fellowships, because we're funding fellowships. We think fellowships are important, but inside the organization, you have to have that structure where you're building your team, where your team functions again, and you're measuring the success of your team against the goals of the organization. And you can have a venture satisfaction survey and a net promoter score for your ventures. So if I'm providing good management assistance, I'm expecting to get a good net promoter score for my ventures. If I'm managing my team well, I'm going to get a good net promoter score from my team. And the end results, which we have to go back to, is what impact is this having on kids? And so we know that the CMOs that we funded in the past under the no excuses model, had results that are twice the results for other low-income and working-class kids, and the percentage of kids that graduate from college is about 5 times that. We're expecting much more from our innovative schools model because the research is showing us that those models will enhance performance. But you got to connect all of this work back to the bottom line, and that's creating excellent opportunities for kids that transform their lives.
Yeah. So I'd love to keep on that, which is how are you thinking, Kara, when it comes to these investments that you all are making? How do you think about metrics and measuring the impact of that work? Because it's a question that comes up often, and I know you guys are thinking about it.
Question.
Yeah.
So I think that Deborah said earlier, like if you don't have a goal or if you're not measuring it, you're not tracking it, then you're not really committed to it, right? So certainly that is true with this as well. I think the first thing we've learned is just to take stock of where we're at right now. So one of the things we did was look at like what percentage of our directors sitting in the central office came through internal pipelines. We're sort of shocked by how low that number was. So a really good measure for us is, can we get to a place where, let's be ambitious, 50% of the directors sitting in our central office came from more junior pathways to that level, right? So we weren't looking for external talent, but we were really truly succession planning from all the way down. So I think that's one measure that is important to us. I think that certainly you want to see that people are still happy and satisfied in the work while you continue to do this. So we look at very much our Net Promoter Scores, and for us that's typically how likely someone is to refer a friend to work with us, which is a common one that folks will see. So we have goals around what we think that number should look like. In addition, I think we want to see that the 2 areas we've identified, which again were similar to the 2 areas up here on, that we looked at earlier in the report, that we don't have any significant outliers like that in staff engagement surveys. So we would therefore say we should have a measure around 30% of our staff shouldn't be saying that opportunities for growth is a reason why they would not stay in the next 2 years. That should look more like it's in line with the other kind of areas of growth we have, so maybe 15% rather than 30%. So I think it's looking at taking stock of where you're at and having some really clear, ambitious goals, but also, again, like with the long game, incremental goals of how quickly you think you're going to get there, right? If we do a staff engagement survey once a year, I don't think that with the measures we're putting in place that I'm going to see a 15% difference in that metric next time. Like, that would be awesome, but I don't think it's going to come true. So that's where we're setting goals of, okay, so what if we saw a 10% difference this year and then we added another? So I think taking stock of where you're at and then having really specific goals that also build over time, and thinking about how quickly you think you can get there. And then, of course, succession planning should be another one of these. So to the extent that you are able to internally fill senior level positions through growth in your home office, I think that's an exceptional goal. And ideally, you should be filling every C-level seat with someone who has grown through your organization.
Great. So I want to move us to the topic of diversity, and I think Deb, you did just a wonderful job up front talking about some of the key barriers to why we don't have the leaders today that we need and that we want. And it sounds like this is a priority for New Schools, and you mentioned a number of different initiatives that you all are investing in. So I want to just invite you to kind of have the first word on this, but then I'm going to move to Kara and Talia and ask you to just talk again, what is really happening on the ground in each of your systems. I know this is a focus of the work, and so would love to again get tactical and hear some of the concrete things that are happening there. But Deb, as you think about the work that New Schools is doing and then the portfolio of organizations you're supporting, particularly the CMOs that you support, are people talking about this more? Just talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the different entrepreneurs and leaders you support about this issue.
Well, we're very happy that people talk about it, and we hope that they continue to talk, but we are encouraging people to move to action and not to keep talking. We also are encouraging folks to help us find funders. Because we do think in the same way that we focused on teaching and we had a funders collaborative around that work, in the same way that when funders decided that the CMO, we would move from single sites to CMOs and we'd build the CMO market, funders came together to fund that. And so we are looking for funders to help support this work both, and I'm just going to say it again, we are not simply supporting having Black and Latino leaders on senior leadership teams of organizations that are not led by Black and Latino CEOs. So we expect that to be able to invest in more organizations that are led by Black and Latino leaders, and we expect to have more on the boards of all of the organizations in our portfolio. So part of our diligence now is a very direct question on what is your commitment to diversity, where are you now, and what is your plan to improve diversity. In the same way that we ask them, how are you going to build your leadership team? What's your financial model? What is your ed design? So if you've never, and we got here because there are foundations that ask that of you. And what they say, if you don't, just as we have milestones, and Carmita's milestone is that some percentage of her fellows are going to be senior leaders in X amount of time. If she doesn't meet her milestones, she doesn't get a reinvestment from us. If you don't meet your leadership milestones, you won't get additional investments from us either. And we've never asked for it before. But we found that there were foundations who asked for it, and the people that their grantees would be responsive if you ask for it. And so it's our goal that we know it needs to be supported. We're estimating that we'd like to be able to invest maybe about 16 million over the next 3 years, and maybe about 36 over the next 5 years, which is small and sort of in line with some of our other investment areas. But you have to put a number out there, and you have to find great entrepreneurs that funders want to support. And we think it can be done.
Great. Well, so in the spirit of talk is good, but action is much, much better, would love to hear what's happening in Tulsa around this. Could you tell us about one or two things around the diversity topic specifically that you guys are working on or are excited about?
Yeah, so when Deborah says we got to move talk to action, she's absolutely right, because I feel like we're a little behind the eight ball in Tulsa. But we're starting to develop what is a deeper strategy to actually build a culture of diversity and equity across the district. And so, and that's coming in from the senior leadership, as well as from our new superintendent, Deborah Gist, which with lots of excitement, because I think we have to have that equity stance, not only for our students, but also for our workforce. And in having that as a priority is actually refreshing for us, because it hasn't necessarily been the case, just to be honest. In a state where we have dealt with deep shortages, not just for teachers but for principals, diversity should have been a priority, but it wasn't. It was filling classrooms with qualified folks, and so it was a very difficult balance of, we want as many people as we can. We don't necessarily have even the pool to be able to attract folks that really look like the students we serve. And so now that we have a much more intentional approach, I think looking at best practices in other districts as well as other CMOs would actually be the most helpful step that we're taking in not only developing our strategic plan for recruiting educators of color, but also developing structures by which the folks that we have managing or overseeing the central office teams are thinking very intentionally about the diversity of their teams and how to support that and make that part of the way that they do business, as opposed to an afterthought. Not just thinking about recruiting and bringing people on the ground, but also retaining them and developing them into the future leaders. So we're in the very beginning stages. So I very much take the comment from Deborah of the talking to action, because we're very much in that stage. So.
And Karen, can you talk a little bit as a Senior Director of Diversity and Talent Development? I know this is something that Uncommon has made a named priority. So talk a little bit about what action looks like on the ground at Uncommon.
Yeah.
So we started with having a working group a few years ago of teachers and leaders who came together to help us develop our kind of mission or vision statement around this, which I do think is like a critical first step, just to name it and say this is what we want aspirationally to be. We then, this year, we named this as a priority in the sense that we decided to hire a director of diversity. We were lucky to get a 17-year veteran of Uncommon School to take that position, Shauna Pyatt. She's an outstanding person to lead the work. She has tons of critical expertise in working with our families and students in Newark as a classroom teacher. And so I think having folks who have a deep understanding of who the students you serve are is critical as a part of how you staff a team. Some of the work that we're actually doing that Shauna and the rest of us work on, I'll start with just briefly with like a school-facing one, and then the others more what we're doing for the home office. But we have a summer teaching fellowship program that's closely modeled actually off of KIPP DC's Capital Teaching Residency, which I know E.L. Haynes was also a partner on. So this year we had 103 summer teaching fellows. That group is predominantly Black or Latino college juniors who come and work with us over the summer, and then they receive offers to come back. We offered to 76 of them right off the bat to come back and return to teach with us. We have 14 more who are coming back to sample with us this fall, who I'm optimistic will receive offers, having implemented the feedback they received. So that's, we expect to have about a 90% offer rate. And looking at our historical data, we get about 80% who actually come on and teach with us. So that is radically changing the face of who is in our classrooms, which I think is a critical part of showing that we are putting some action where our planning is around it. That's not a small feat to pull off, but is a really critical part of the work. In terms of for the central office team, what this looks like, one of the things, and this is actually for schools and central office we're working on, but we have a group who are designing facilitation guides for us to use to have staff conversations around this. Now, of course, everyone's like, next step is like, great, what are we doing with students? And we're like, let's slow the train down for a minute. Like, we as a group of adults are not proficient enough in this conversation yet. So we have a group of teachers and leaders from our school who come together. They work on facilitation guides. Often these look like article discussions. We used Whistling Vivaldi, which is an excellent text if you haven't seen it before, as one of the readings that we are going to use. And so we are committed to every school having 2 professional development sessions that is focused on race and equity, again, as a staff together. And also our home office does those as well, and we trained a group of facilitators there with Michelle Molitor's help, who can run those sessions in our home office. And finally, we have a mentorship program. We have about 70 participants as mentees and 70 mentors who work together. In addition to that, we do like a speaker series where folks are able to come together as a community and hear the leadership stories of different leaders of color or teachers of color at Uncommon. And all of those, I think, in an effort to say, like, this is a nuanced and challenging thing to work on as an organization, but placing priority and time and giving people a space, honestly, to have a clear, constructive conversation around it is our starting point now.
Thank you. And what I so appreciate across all of these comments is just, I think we keep hearing echoes of we need to name this both across, all of our folks, but also when it comes to diversity, we have to name it as a key priority and really authentically believe that it matters, and that it matters because it's the right thing to do for impact with students and with the families that we serve. And then second, that it takes work and that it's something you can learn and build muscle on over time, and that action may start with baby steps or small steps, but it's action, and you have to walk before you run. And so really appreciate just the concrete things happening out there. So I want to move to the panel and to the open Q&A for our panelists in a moment, but thought I would just close this portion of our discussion with a little bit of a forward-looking question, which is, 5 years from now, let's imagine that our dear friend Jimmy has convened us again to talk about this issue of leadership and system leadership in K-12 education. So fast forward 5 years from now, what is it that you hope we're talking about? What do we hope the conversation looks like 5 years from now? And so, Deb, I think I'll start with you.
5 years from now, it is my expectation that New Schools will be a leader in this space, that our internal organization will be a model of what diversity at the senior leadership level looks like. It will also be a time when Deborah Bentz is here, and one of the things that she did when she was still with us, created this hashtag Diversify Ed, and we begged people to give us just a 75-word story of the little baby steps that you're taking. And many people who are doing great things are just reluctant to give us 75 words with a photo or a video. And then I'll have so many to post that it will be like being screened like a challenge to get your little thing posted on our website.
Everybody here has their homework, I think. You got to do that. Great. Sarah, what about for you?
Wow, that's a really hard question. I think it will look like that it is not unusual for this conversation to be happening organically between organizations. I would hope that we would be doing a gallery walk, because there would be so many best practices to share that everybody would have something innovative to bring to the table, and that organizations, no matter what the size of their team, would feel like they walked away being able to implement something on Monday that would work for them. And I think that, in it, maybe I'll take you past 5 years a little bit, but I hope that we feel that all of the effort that we're putting into retaining folks and diversifying our workforce is really changing the face of who is leading education reform in this country. And I would hope that at Uncommon, we would be proudly saying, here's our 10 alums from Uncommon schools, and here's the path that they're on to be the next CEO. And 5 years is a tight timeline for that, but let's have ambitious goals.
Great, thank you. Talia, what about for you?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. I think on the larger scheme, I would hope that when we come back in 5 years, that we're really sharing how we've changed our mindset around central office and how important it is to develop leaders in order to have a collective impact around education reform. That we're also creating the conditions for leadership development to be a priority across the organization, and that we're learning from each other as to the things that we've done that have proven to be effective in getting everyone engaged around talent development as a critical and top strategy to achieve our goals of impacting kids and improving student learning. And I think from the very contextual side of Tulsa, I think that I would hope that we've developed really clear career pathways for directors and managers that emulate the great things that we're seeing with our principal supervisors, and that we've created a system by which people see that there are opportunities for them to continue investing their time and their effort in public education, and that we're seeing some great improvements in retention, and I want to see that 15% knocked back to 7%.
I like this. I like the big aspirational goals. That's great. And Jimmy, what about you? You can have the last word on this one.
So metrics are just so difficult in talent development. And what I would love 5 years from now is for a couple of organizations, districts, charters, to have done the hard work to measure things like retention and then link those to student performance, because we all believe that's true, but capturing the data and then doing the analysis that shows that it's true, I think that I would love to have some hard data that we can all talk about there. And then I'd love to have 1 or 2 proof points with a strong data story that investing in leadership at the system level does have a result for students and impacts student achievement. That there are a couple of exemplars, like Kara was suggesting, saying, we made some progress. It's not perfect. We've moved the needle 5 percentage points or 10 percentage points or whatever it is, but here's what we've learned, and that there's a great collaboration and sharing of best practice, recognizing it's not going to be perfect.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you all for those big ideas and big aspirations, and we've got a bit of time left, and so wanted to open it up to any questions or reflections from our audience. Yes, go right ahead.
Sean Hartnett with Central City Public Charter Schools here in Washington, D.C. And I cannot thank you enough, one, for the work that you all have done, but then I think this discussion.
Sorry, we're going to give you a mic.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
The discussion is awesome. In particular, I think I have 1,000 things to say, so I won't say them. I'll formulate it in a question and let you all talk about it. But in particular,
I am interested in this discussion around race. Thank you so much, Dr. Deborah McGriff, for your regular boldness around this topic, in particular the critical mass theory. I think that's amazing because so many African Americans who I speak with who move into executive roles oftentimes find themselves in a space where they are then required to assimilate. And it becomes very difficult. And I'm not that person. If I'm bringing my Black self to the organization and I'm going to be myself in that organization in a way that should change that organization. And we should feel comfortable bringing that to the organizations that we serve if we really want to have an impact on children. One of the things that was interesting, though, in the discussion as I was thinking about it as a person who's responsible for growing and developing people is, yes, a lot of people say that they want development. A lot of people say they want to be developed to move to the new role. And this, I think, does have some racial implications. But in the space of my own personal view about what I need to develop on and my manager's view of what I need to develop on, like that does not always match and is oftentimes the rub that causes people to leave an organization, especially in Washington, D.C., that is charter proliferated, where if I don't like the feedback I'm getting, I can get a job down the street in a week. And so was wondering, and when you think in that space, there are racial implications. What my white manager thinks I need to grow and what I think I need to grow, right, as or me as an African American male manager and managing a white female and what she thinks she needs to grow, all of a sudden the nuances of this race discussion stand up in a very significant way. Would love your thoughts on that. And if then folks don't have questions, I have about 20 others. We are working on this at Center City.
I don't know if you want to talk about the competency maps, because I think a lot of what that's about is directly in response to that question.
Yeah, so it's an incredibly important question. My perspective, there's no simple answer. I think part of the answer, though, is as much extreme clarity on the front end about what the right competencies are for success in a role. And then a really honest conversation, not only at the time of the annual review, but all throughout the year about why those competencies are the right ones for success, either in current role or future desired role, and just having either extreme clarity based on the description of competencies or data throughout the year that supports progress towards competencies. And so that's a big part of not just the issue around race and diversity, but that clarity, I think, is a lot of why we develop the competency maps. And it sounds like in your your implementation of the maps, you might be seeing some of that. But I would drive towards extreme clarity as a starting point, and then
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That's what we're seeing in terms of using the maps, even in our own internal department, because there hasn't been very clear roles and responsibilities, beyond a job description. So understanding really what's the talent map that you need to fill in order to fill leadership roles, then it leaves subjectivity sort of out of the question, and it's also a training tool for managers. Oh, that's what I should be looking for. So I was totally focused on the wrong area, because this is what I need to be looking for in terms of developing this talent for the future. So I totally agree with you that that's definitely a practical use of the blueprint, and definitely one that you could utilize.
Yeah, and much of the research around competency maps that we've looked into does suggest that both around gender, around ethnicity, around race, that really being transparent at each level of an organization, from junior contributor to a senior manager, if you're a finance professional, this isn't personal. This is what excellence looks like at each level and in HR. And similarly, as you think about things like developing strong teams or being an effective communicator, to really be able to name specifically what that looks like helps to create a safer space for people of difference to talk about the work.
I would also add something that we just started to take a look at is strength finders. And knowing that everybody on your team isn't going to be strong in everything, but your team has to be strong in everything, and having a real understanding of that profile and how to work with people differently because their strengths are different, and working from their strengths rather than their weaknesses.
Yeah, I would just echo StrengthsFinders is a really strong tool, especially for more junior staff. But I would say 2 additional things. People, I think you have to take people on this journey when you do the competency mapping to ensure exactly what you're saying, which is like a broad variety of perspectives have agreed upon this, right? So I don't think it's just work that the talent team can do in isolation. The people who have to execute the behavior are all of your managers who are doing it. So if they don't believe in the tool and buy into it at a deep level and think that it's true, and if junior staff don't also feel that way, then it's just a tool. It's not actually it's not solving the problem you're trying to solve. And then I would highly recommend Laszlo Bock's Work Rules. Work Rules, it's like there were 2 books that came out from Google earlier this spring. But Work Rules is a fascinating study, and I found reading this, I drew a lot that applied right to our work. And he talks a lot about the journey of the difference between evaluation and development and the framing that you need to do and the communication, which I think is totally critical to using the competency maps well. So it's a good read.
Great. We have a question. Do you want to, in the black sweater or black jacket? Yeah, you want to put your hand up. Sorry, I know you're behind.
Hi. And then I'll just pass it back to you. Hi, my name is Carmita Vaughn. I'm the founder and president of the Surge Institute. And we specifically identify, train, support emerging leaders of color in preparation for senior and executive level roles, currently in Chicago, but growing to a number of cities in the coming years. And this question is specifically for Jimmy. Hi, good to see you. But I would love to hear any other perspectives. And I just want to push on this data question, because as a person that's frankly spent much of the past 2 years going around and talking to people about the necessity of greater diversity and leadership in our work, I find that a lot of people get that superficially. And they get that there needs to be greater representation. But when you push a bit, the reasons are more about checking the boxes than really understanding the why behind it. And I think you touched on that a bit earlier in your opening comments, but I would love to hear if you have particular data that you reference as you're around talking about this. And I mean, I've pulled data from other sectors. There's a lot of work in tech and other places as you talk about difference and how it leads to greater innovation and other sorts of things. And frankly, better overall results for teams. But I think I find this rub in getting people to get beyond just having more black and brown faces, honestly, but recognizing that having that representation of the communities that we serve ultimately changes both what we do and how we do it.
So I think to answer the question directly, have we seen any data other than the Education Pioneers report, which is the data there is not linked specifically to results and student achievement, but more kind of survey as we described. We haven't seen any of that data, nor do I have any great anecdotes. I love the idea and would love to share, love for you to share with us the data you're bringing in from other sectors. I think that's pretty powerful anecdotally. But I think it's a place that we as a sector really should lean in and see if there's a way, even at relatively small scale, to capture some of that data, because it's the felt experience that we all have is it's true, but we don't have data that we can pound the table with.
Soon to be posted on the New Schools website will be a blog, and a part of that blog, there's one blog up now, and we only mention Ed Pioneers and the McKinsey study, but the blog that we're going to post in the next couple of weeks will give a summary of the data that clearly shows that the benefits of diversity is innovation, creativity, impact, and so that'll be available on our website.
I haven't, this just occurred to me. Mike mentioned at the beginning in his introduction that one of our tools is an organizational effectiveness tool, and it's a broad-based diagnostic where we actually might be able to bring some really powerful data to bear from organizations in the sector where we're working based on the racial composition of their staffs and other elements of diversity. So let us get back to you in a week or two, but there might be a way to use some of that data to bring it to bear.
Great. Yes, over here.
Well, I just want to pile on to this. Deborah Mintz, formerly of New Schools Venture Fund. Do send your 75-word baby steps to Deborah. I think it's really important that people speak up. But I now work at MLT, and Carmita, where are you, darling? Nice to see you again. So you actually said what I was going to say. I just want to pile on, because I've actually been combing the research myself. Want to say that I have a similar experience out in the world talking with corporates about our MLT fellows and having this conversation, what are the benefits of diversity? Now, McKinsey did a very nice worldwide study last year correlating profit and diversity, which obviously is that's an example of what we'd like to have in this education sector, right? We'd like to be able to correlate our outcomes to more diverse actors. And really, though, I think be able to unpack this question of this intuitive idea that having role models for our students who look, you were very articulate talking about this. I forget which one of you spoke about this so beautifully, about the impact for an individual student of having someone who looks like them lead a classroom, lead a school district. But unless Deborah has found stuff that I haven't found, and I hope she has, the actual data on role models and that kind of leadership and its impact is very scant. And I'm wondering if some of us couldn't collaborate to try to develop some data around that, because it's a conversation that's increasingly happening. And my fear is we're increasingly going to be pressed to unpack that and demonstrate what is that effect, how do we account for it, and what's the valence on it as well.
Great. I think I've been given the 5 minutes, so I want to come back because I know you have your question. So this will be our last question, and then I invite you all to follow up with any of us individually.
So my name is Benita Gordon, and I'm a former DCPS teacher. Was recruited from Miami to come up and be a teacher leader. Did not leave because of any particular reason except I was drained. I was teaching 6 classes, being a teacher leader, so I would be in the hall. I'm security. I'm the assistant to the assistant principal. I am the people, everything. Now I'm at a performance management systems that's chartered or funded through DCPS at parochial and private schools. My question is, as a teacher of 17 years who was ready to transition out of the classroom into leadership, into talent development, into going back to HBCUs, recruiting, bringing my teachers in. My friends call me the Googler because I'm trying to figure out how to get you into a master's program. You need to go over here to be a doctorate in SPED. I don't see enough of a platform so that there's one place we can go to and say, this is an organization where you can be a fellow here. I'm just the type of person that I'm going to research it for myself and figure it out. But I need to know all of the organizations in the room. How can we find one database, one platform where those of us who are in the trenches, who feel like we can't turn anything around because we're in the trenches, who want to come out, but I don't want to leave education. I love teaching the urban education. I love teaching rural education. I want to make sure that my students do see someone, and I don't need data to tell you that it's important for a child to turn around in their classroom and see someone looking at them that looks like them. You don't need, and I know you need it for the money, but you don't need it for that child. You don't need it for that child, for them to understand that I'm going to come over here and speak to you about something in private, but I still am going to push you beyond any measure of belief that you thought you could hold. But I need everyone in the room to come together and make a database, make a platform for those of us who are searching for it, who are ready to transition out, are able to find it. I know all of the organizations in this room, but that's because I'm on Twitter and I'm looking for it myself. But how do we get that format started?
I'm putting that down as one of the things that New Schools needs to, because we do have a pipeline of organizations that we're going to reach out to be supportive of the folks that we invest in and people who can help source ventures for us. And we maybe need a page on our website too that lists those we don't list the pipeline folks. We're only listing the people that we invest in.
That's a great call to action to end on. Thank you. That's great.
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
thank you again for everyone who came. Thank you for everyone on the webcast for tuning in. We look forward to sharing more of the great work of EdFuel, and just want to say thank you again and ask for applause for the panelists.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much to EdFuel for just making the time and space for the conversation. Please stay and enjoy refreshments